So we arrive at the stage of having got down to the final image that we're going to spend a little bit of time working up in Photoshop, more than likely. So what I do in a Lightroom first of all is just prepare the image to send across to Photoshop. So here are the things I do. So first of all, here's the image, and you'll remember that we've just selected this and we've put initial adjustments on it. But those adjustments were based on getting the exposure up to a point where we could assess the image against all the others in the set. So they weren't really a considered set of adjustments, just a quick and dirty set of adjustments, just so that we could see the images properly. So the first thing I'm going to do is take all those adjustments off. So remember, this is the copy that we're going to work on, coloured green, which is a virtual copy of this one, which is coloured yellow. So we go over to this one and we click develop, and it takes us over to the develop module. And the first thing I'm going to do is, believe it or not, reset all those adjustments that I made. So I do that by clicking the reset button, and bang, the exposure's gone right down again. Right, now I'll take you through my procedure for every image as I get ready to send it to Photoshop, or indeed just finish it off in Lightroom. So first, down this side, you'll see there's a whole series of sections for helping you transform the image. You can actually alter the order of these, and I've put them in the order at which I tend to work down them. All right, you can move them about, very easy, drag and drop them. And the first one is lens corrections, and I always go in here and I always click remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. Profile corrections just means that Adobe apply a set of corrections to correct the particular lens that you've been using. It'll automatically recognize the lens, and if you notice, just watch the image. If I switch it off and switch it on, it's just taking a little bit of the barrel distortion out. Even with a good lens, there's always a little bit of barrel distortion. So we then go down to the next one, which is basic. And the first thing that I do is I will hit auto again. Exactly the same thing, just for a starter for 10. So hit auto and bang, it's already pulled it straight up. And it's always worth doing this because, I say, Adobe have spent, probably years perfecting this algorithm. And what it's done is it's taken the exposure, it's basically looking at the histogram, of course, and making the histogram into as nice a histogram as it can, so that the whites aren't blown out, it's pulled the blacks up as far as it can, so on and so forth. So I always hit that to start with. And so having done that, the next thing I'll do is, may come slightly surprising, is that I will drop a crop on the image if I know that it is, a crop's going to be needed. Obviously, if you look at this image, we're obviously not going to use all this area right up here and across the top. So I drop a crop on because it's silly to export a bigger file over to Photoshop than you need to, or indeed be working on a bigger file than you need to, even in Lightroom, if that's the way you choose ultimately to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a crop on. This is the crop tool here, and I crop to a certain proportion, which is 1 by 1.454, and for the landscape, obviously the way round for the portrait. And the reason I do that will be explained much later on in the course, but suffice to say, it makes a print, if you do ultimately decide to print, it will make the print fit a standard cut mount exactly, and that's quite important to my workflow. But more of that later. So having dropped that crop on of that proportion, I'll now bring it down to the point where I know it's sensible. So this would be a good example where obviously I ultimately want to get rid of that. Of course I do, this canoe up in the top right corner, but obviously I can't it's got to stay in the frame at this point because it would be too close on this ore. But if I have a look at that and just move it across slightly, and I never go too tight, never ever go too tight. Clearly give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. You can always crop in tighter later, but I'd say that's okay for the time being. That's a reasonable crop. So I do that. So now we're down to a more sensible crop. And then the next thing I'll have a look at is the white balance. If I've shot in a studio or anywhere indoors, I will have shot a grey card. I always shoot a grey card, and then I can use that to determine my white balance using the white balance dropper tool here. But obviously when we're outdoors we can't. So I might just have a look at, as shot is nearly always perfect actually outdoors on a decent sunny day or a decently lit day, not overly sunny day. And what I'm really looking for is the skin tones, to be truthful. We know this should be white, but it's going to be dirty white because it's the River Trent at the end of the day. So I'm looking for skin tones, and these, they look a little bit warm, but they're not too bad. So I might just try here and see what daylight looks like, and that's not changed it much at all. In fact, I think it's made a skin go redder. So to undo any change in Lightroom, it's Control Z. So I undo that. Or I might just get the white balance selector tool here and pick something that looks mid-grey. And a helmet about there looks mid-grey. And I don't even like that. That's made it go yellower still. So I'm not happy with any of those. So excuse me. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z. And I'm going to leave it as it is. It's a little bit blue, but at the end of the day, we don't want it too warm anyway. So now I come down to the adjustments that Photoshop has made. And I'm quite happy with these, to be truthful. It's took the highlights right down because that's where all the blowout's going to be, if there is any. But we can see up here on this histogram, if you look up in the top right, that the Adobe engineers have adjusted this picture using the auto button such that there's nothing blowing out here, and there's very, very few blacked out shadows. I sometimes do have a look at the whites and blacks, particularly where there's a lot of whites in a picture. And the way you find out if your whites are going to start blowing is if you click on it and hold down Alt, then the screen goes black, and as you move across, everything that's coming up white, it would be blown out. And clearly we don't want that. And if you notice when we started, it was +11, and that's what the Adobe engineers have done. Look, they've allowed just a fraction of blowout. If we went all the way across, we could get rid of it all. But then if I show you if I let go of Alt, the picture looks very dull. So back to that, and back to +11, which is where the good old Adobe engineers had originally got it. And if you're struggling a bit with your mouse for getting that sensitive, just type it in, and we're back exactly where we are. So I'm happy with these with these adjustments. No reason to change them. I wouldn't touch any of these on this particular image. I would on some of my underwater images, but not on any of these. I'm happy that it doesn't look oversaturated. There's plenty of colour in here, but you notice there's very little. That's probably the reds or the oranges that are just clipping across the top there, oversaturated, but not too much. So I'm happy with that. And the final thing I'll do is just have a look at how much sharpening Lightroom's put in, and that's under the detail slider. And Lightroom's put in a standard amount of sharpening, and that'll be a little bit too much for me because I'm going to sharpen in Photoshop. So what I do is I like to bring that down. If I'm taking an image into Photoshop, I like to bring that down to 25, but then I'll determine where it's going to be sharpened, and you do that by clicking the masking slider there, click Alt again, and slide it across, and as it comes in, the things that are white are the things that are going to be sharpened. And we only really want this pre-sharpening, just the speckles, the outline of the rider. We certainly don't want the water sharpening because that's where the noise is. And if I let go, so now I've turned down the sharpening, but I've also only applied it in the places that I want to apply it. And at this point, I would be happy with that. I wouldn't want to do any more changes in Lightroom, and I'd be happy to export it to Photoshop to get on with the next stages. And to export it to Photoshop, if you're in Lightroom, it's really very, very easy. The shortcut is Control E. I think you can go up here to edit. No, not edit, photo, editing, there we go, editing. So we could do that, but I never ever do that. I just use the shortcut, which is Control E, and it will go away now. And what you can't see on my other screen is Photoshop is opening up with that image. Okay.